Well, I'm really grateful for today's guest. Today, we are going to have an incredible conversation. I hope to invite everyone into in a way that blesses you and nourishes you. And again, here in Midwest May, we're really going around what we call the Heartland Fellowship of Churches here in the region of our churches. I'm in Nebraska, and it's in the Heartland. And so we're going to be having ministers from around the Midwest speak to issues that really pertain to the culture here, which I think is very important. I think the Heartland of America is an important region and piece of our country. And so we got Brandle Easter. He is an incredible man. I am so grateful. I've known him since I first became a Christian. Part of that is because I was into basketball, and he, as you're going to see, he is a hooper, once a hooper, always a hooper. But Brandle has been in the full-time ministry for 24 years. And I think when he went into the ministry, I was still in middle school, I think. But he served in youth and family ministry, campus ministry, singles ministry, marrieds ministry, and has been leading a church for several years. He played basketball professionally. And so for me, this is huge because I don't talk to many pros, people who actually played. I played in college. I trained to go play overseas, but my knee gave out and it didn't work. But he played overseas, many different countries, and he's got a coach's heart. I think the thing about Brandon that I really have always loved since I've been a baby Christian is that I've always been around a coach. And he's someone who really understands how to coach people up spiritually. And he's been married to him and his wife have been married for over 20 years, and they've got two sons. And so, Brandle, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a privilege and an honor to be on the show with you on your channel. You're doing an incredible work in the Lord, and I'm excited to see you continue to move the needle.
I appreciate that, man. You inspire me. You inspire me, man. I'm glad to have you on today. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about your conversion, and then I want you to tie that into going into the ministry.
Well, it's funny because it's so far removed. I'm so far removed from my conversion when I became a Christian. It almost sounds odd to share it. I actually moved to Minnesota to kill somebody. And I was there and I couldn't get connected to the folks that I needed to get connected to. I moved to Minnesota. I was from California. I grew up in Northern California and kind of moved up the coast. And I ended up in Southern California for some time, kind of floating around. And I got to this point where I needed to move. They were doing the 3 strikes and you're out in Southern California, and that was a bit overboard. And I felt like it was time to go. And so I found a way, got connected, and I ended up in the Midwest. And that was my reason for coming to the Midwest. And I couldn't get connected with the folks that I needed to get connected to. And in my exercise of trying to stay on point, ready to do what I needed to do when that opportunity arose, a guy named Todd Caraway met me at a Bally's Fitness, 24-hour fitness, and he shared his faith with me. And he shared his faith with me, included his family and the body of Christ for 3.5 years before I became a Christian. I was a pretty long conversion. I'm grateful for Todd and the church there in Minneapolis. It was then the Minneapolis St. Paul Church of Christ, and now it's a Two Cities church.
And then going into the ministry, what made you want to go into the ministry, and really what drew you into the ministry?
I believe that there were several things. One, Doug and Suzanne Beatty were leading the church in Minneapolis at the time. And he took an interest in me and invited me to be in the teen ministry. And I had accomplished all I wanted to accomplish in life as far as basketball was concerned. My goal was to go overseas and play. And so I was just kind of living. And I was a child development technician for quite some time in the public, private and charter sectors. And he said, "Hey, I think you do pretty well with the kids." And so he turned me on to the teen ministry, and I enjoyed it. There was an opportunity to go a little bit further than I could in the school system.
Well, you've been in ministry for quite some time. What is something that you felt like has given you some longevity in that?
Let me plug the. I think people were really patient with me.
Mm,
I especially appreciate the Wichita church. They've allowed me to be here for 12 years and watch me transform and give me the space to do that. And I'm sure that it was uncomfortable for the body as much as it was for me, and probably more so. But I think there's a level of patience that I received during the course of my ministry time.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I love kind of where you're at in terms of people inspiring you and people investing, because I think that part of ministry is about people around you who see a dream, have a dream for you. I think the first person in my life that really had a ministry dream for me was my grandma. She passed away in 2013. But, I get emotional every time I think about her, because she would tell me when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, "You're going to be a minister one day." And I remember resenting her for that. I'm not going in. We're going to go get you some slacks and you're going to put a tie on it. And I just, resented the whole thing. But, it's interesting because sophomore year of high school, that's when it's like, oh, whoa, okay, yeah, I need God. And then here we are, 37 years later, so to speak.
Wow.
So it's interesting the people that God puts in your life, and then Jermaine Peacock, Charlie Sawyer, Maurice
Absolutely.
Hooks, I got Malvin Warwick. I had so many people that have just had a
Sure.
dream and a vision. So I appreciate what you're saying about patience, and people around us having patience, because being a minister is demanding. It rightfully so, but if there's one thing that I think we got to put in the gas tank, it would be patience. I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. In terms of trauma, let me define trauma, and then I'm gonna have you kind of think about how you would answer this.
Okay.
So for me, trauma. So biblically speaking, trauma is a lack of Sabbath on the inside of a person, right? Trauma is something that, okay, so if I observe Sabbath, so I take a day off, trauma will prevent the experience of it, because observing it, okay, great. But the experience of Sabbath, that inner dwelling of peace, and I'm in sync with God, and I'm in sync with my brother and my sister, that's Sabbath. Especially when you go back and you look at the Decalogue, it's transitional, meaning it's right in between. We got to be close to God, and we need to be close to our neighbor. And so Sabbath is about being in sync with God and being in sync with our neighbor. And so trauma is what happens when is really disrupts that. And I just kind of want to set that up in terms of loss, grief. When you think about the different experiences that have shaped how you look at what people need when they come through the front door of your church. When you think of when people get baptized, and now all of a sudden the baptism doesn't wash away all of the trauma. They get forgiveness, the shame, that the shame of the sin is removed, and so forth. But as far as the trauma goes, that's like this process of healing. Healing is almost different from forgiveness in some ways. And so when you think about the losses, when you think about the signature moments in your life, how has that shaped how you minister to God's people?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of learning from losing. And I remember the guy that reached out to me, his name is Todd Caraway. I remember being a campus minister at the University of Washington in Seattle. And there was a guy that I knew from my former life that he had connected with, and he helped him. He was helping him along and knowing God. And he had called me and he said, "Hey, this guy's ready to get baptized." And I was in this mode of, I didn't think that he was ready to be baptized. From Seattle, I was able to ESP that in my mind. he said something that was pretty shocking to me. Um, he said, you know, Brandle, I hope you haven't forgotten where you came from. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I believe that sometimes as we move on as Christians, we can forget, and maybe it's just me and everybody in the world's got this figured out and it's just me. But there's this place where we forget the grace that God has showed us. We forget the things that we've gone through, and sometimes we're not. I don't know if I was always self-aware the way that I needed to be. When we become self-aware, you know, it's like the tax collector, you know, and the publican. It's like, you know, you figure out where you're at in the grand scheme of things. Thank God I'm not this person. It's like, you are that person. You're still that person. And so, you know, trauma in my mind is peace. And when we don't have peace, it's difficult to see beyond what's immediately clouding our view of the true identity, love, grace, and mercy of God, and being able to embrace that. And in a lot of ways, it's difficult to love when we don't experience it. You can't give what you don't have. And so I think that it's made me a bit more compassionate. It's probably a gift and a curse, but there's a level of understanding that everyone has a journey. Everyone has a different way in which they learn. And you can't coach anyone unless they want to be coached. And in the same way, when you look at scripture, you know, God is always revealing himself, but it doesn't mean that because he's revealed himself that people will respond the correct way. And you know, God is long suffering. And so there's this piece of understanding that trauma and grief and the like are things that people go through and they have to process based on their understanding. And it's important to have a level of patience and understanding, not to just, you know, step off to the side, but to walk with them if they're willing. And that's a longer process. I mean, I got reached out to 3.5 years. So I'm sure people have gone longer, but that's unique in my mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I remember once we were talking and you said something that's never left me. You had shared how some people need, it's kind of like a primer. A primer sets people up to understand the bigger picture. Some people need some life experiences before they study the Bible to prepare their heart. You know, Hosea, I believe in the prophets, it talks about plow the unplowed ground. And so this idea that we're going to sort of scratch up something that is kind of hard, it's kind of concrete. Life experiences sometimes, it's not just someone coming to church, it's not just someone getting into a Bible study, it's all the things that God has been doing through their entire life to convert their heart. Absolutely. For this moment. And so I just remember you saying that, because how trauma now affects that is some people have been through such dark experiences, profoundly dark experiences, that let's say they received the message of God and the message of sexual abuse at the same time, then how does that set them up to be wounded by what we're trying to do? And so what do they need in the meantime? And so as a minister, I can't think, I mean, I just have to imagine there's so many situations where you've had to look at situations and say, that person's going to need time. They're going to need love. They're going to need an experience of safety. They're going to need a sanctuary, not just a building, but an actual lived experience of sanctuary and acceptance. This person is going to need to fall apart and people not leave them. Who knows? The point is people come from all walks of life with all of their different narratives, and then they're coming to the church, and we're kind of streamlining everyone. And the last thing we'd want to do is putting people into a cookie cutter mold. It's not what we see Jesus do. Even when he healed people, he didn't heal people the same way. And so I'm wondering, as a minister, and I don't know if you ever remember saying that to me, I just always stuck out to me as a minister. What does that process kind of look like before someone's ready to study the Bible or ready to make Jesus Lord in this very tangible way?
I think it depends a lot on, I appreciate what you shared. I think a lot of it depends on how they process their trauma. And that's different for everyone. There's some folks that just go, hey, I got to do this. I get it. And then there's other people like myself that were pretty hard-headed. I had near-death experiences while I was in the Midwest, floating back to California, getting money. I think, man, there were several times. There were probably 9 times that I know of that I should have been dead. And the 9th time I got it. It was I was somewhere and I had ordered some fish, and I ended up in this weird conversation, kind of out of pocket. And there were all of these things going on. That's a story for another day. But the guy that was in front of me in line, when I came back to this fish place, this fish shop, 20 minutes later after I had made my order, and he was laid over the top of a garbage can, and he was just laying back. And the people in the 7-Eleven had locked the doors, and they were under the counter. And I was looking around. It was like a ghost town. It was like La Cienega and Pico, somewhere over there. There used to be this fish place, and there was an apartment complex that I had lived in. And so I was just like, I don't believe that I was on the phone. I don't even know if I could get my fish. And I came down there, and this guy had a couple of 22 holes in his stomach, and he was just leaned over. And this was the guy that was in front of me in line. And I had asked him what happened, and he said, man, these guys came up to me and they asked me for my money. And I told them all I have is enough money to get a soda for my fish dinner. And they shot me and they took my chain. And what was interesting was that I saw these guys all day kind of casing our area. And I thought that they were up to no good. And so I was like, okay. And then there were some other things that jumped off that were just like, okay, this is God, you've been so gracious to me. So I called Todd on a burner phone, and I said, hey, I want to have your life. I want to have your friends. I want to have whatever that piece is, how you feel. I want to have that. I want to have your same church family. I want to have everything that you have. I don't want any more, and I don't want any less. I want exactly what you have. So if I have to study the Bible, if I've got to stand on my head, if I've got to do cartwheels, whatever it is, I'm going to do it. But I'm going to get back to Minnesota so that I can do that. And I caught the first thing smoking and started studying the Bible. And so, like I said, it's different for different folks. That was my moment.
Yeah, I definitely think that everybody thinks you have to hit rock bottom. I can't remember. I think it was the author of The Shack, William Paul Young. I went to a retreat once and he was leading it. Anyway, he'd shared that like his daughters hadn't hit rock bottom per se, or that we have this idea of what rock bottom is, and it's like, well, okay, rock bottom might be death for certain people.
Sure.
Like, couple octaves up from rock bottom, but maybe wasn't far. You know what I mean? And God's grace is there until we meet our destiny. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate a lot of people aren't going to have the narrative that you have coming in. Like sometimes people, like we look at Paul and we look at before who he was at like Saul, and we don't understand the trauma that he participated in and acting and all that. But then all of a sudden we have ministers and oh man, this is a choir boy. Oh no. Ministers have a story. They are on a journey, but they absolutely have a story. And I think it's just so interesting because it's like, really, if anyone can relate, it's ministers. because it's a lot of ministers, there's something that happened, and then by the time I think a lot of ministers are in ministry, they have a wealth of experiences to draw from that make them relatable, and I think that that's part of why I just really honor pastors, evangelists, and so forth like that who are ministering in our churches, especially with the last year we've had. Speaking of that, what skills do you think that churches are going to need and that are going to be necessary in order for us to adapt in a changing world? Because like when I look at last year, that was this boom, it was a trigger moment for so many people. And like, so for instance, if you weren't online, you had to get online quickly. And that was one of those deal breakers. Like, hey, if you don't have an online, and then there's these other ways where we're so used to having people maybe come to a location, and now we're actually having to meet them where they are in their communities and so forth, or whatever. There's just many different ways where we're going to have to adapt. Literally, we're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to change. It is impossible to think that we're going to continue to do the same things that we've been doing. It's not going to work. What are some things that you think we're going to have to be mindful of as we adapt?
Sure. I think one is that everyone has a story, and everyone has a story that's pertinent to somebody. And there's people that I've met along the way, and I've shared my story with. They say I can't relate. And then there's other people that I know and I've met, and they've shared their story, and they think that their story is insignificant, and it's exactly what other people need to hear. And so, I believe that we, for a long time here in Wichita, and I'm grateful for the church here. I'm grateful for the people here. We've wanted to explore small groups. And so this year has afforded us the opportunity to do that, to explore small groups. And to your point, what you shared, there's a piece of your small groups in the communities that they're in, being able to set up shop and be. And I don't know if that's something that we're used to in Western culture. And well, I think that a lot of folks, I think over the course of time, I think that a lot of things that God has been nurturing in our lives have just been magnified over this last year. And I think one of the things is the building, how important the building is. And maybe it's just me. To me, it's odd in my community to say that I'm a minister, and they see me going off to work like they go off to work, and when I come home, this is a place that I sleep. Versus this is a place that I connect with people, and we're able to do our small group and invite them and invite ourselves into their lives, versus come to us. We're coming to you, mm-hmm. and to just live, and to live for a long time if that needs to be the case.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And we don't maybe even know all the ways we're going to have to adapt. We just know when the Spirit makes it clear to us, is it made it very clear. We see in the, the written testimony of Scripture that the Spirit would lead the church, to lead Paul, lead the writers, the apostles in different directions. And when that time Absolutely. Came, either you're walking by the Spirit or you're walking by fear. And it's like, boom, it's time to go. And so I think that, I think I was talking to Robin Widener about this, but I think 2020, I think a lot of our spiritual gifts were waiting for 2020. This channel is evidence and really a product of, in 2020. I mean, for me, I had no thought of starting a YouTube channel. Then after George Floyd went down, I was like, all right, let me do this. And then it wasn't just that, it was also, just the need for trauma. People, in the churches really wanting to get their head around trauma, getting their heart around trauma. And being a mental health professional, it's just like, hey, this is, I mean, this is kind of my lane, and so forth like that. Okay, so last question, and this is something I kind of just want to share, and then I really want to just have a conversation about this. In the last week, even, I'll just take the last week. I've gotten so many so many people emailing me, messaging me about church hurts, and it's unreal how many people receive just some very primary hurts here in the church. And from all kinds of, so the spectrum, right? We have all the way from, it's leadership and so forth like that, to I was in leadership and I got hurt, and like minister and member, right? And so for me, I'm kind of one of these people that I kind of create a venue for people to come and share their story, but there's a lot of pain. And a lot of people are stuck. They're just really stuck when it comes to how to move forward, how to heal, how to forgive, how to redevelop their theology. Like, okay, what is a therapeutic theology? How do I have my the way I look at scripture and the way I look at fellowship and so forth? How do I deprogram myself from thinking about it in this systematic way, or this way that's dogmatic and so forth? And one of the things I've heard you say probably in the last 5 years or so consistently is how we think about fruit is important. And I think that it's almost like, hey, the way that whatever comes out of your mouth when we talk about fruit, you just told me a lot about you. And so, yeah, I've just gotten a lot of folks who just, there's a real trauma when it comes to still not getting what they need. And I think I'll just say this one last thing, because this is so pregnant, like the whole subject, that I think between member and minister, there are incredible hurts on both sides. There's triage needed regardless. There has to be a way for us to kind of do meta for a moment. Just come up 10,000 feet and just get a big. I'm wondering for you, what are some things that you're noticing, or some how do we get perspective? Just a little bit of perspective about all the hurt between minister and member.
Boy, that's a loaded question. I appreciate everything that you shared. As I'm listening, it's like I'm guilty. There's so much there, Kyle. And I think one of the things that I've seen in people that have been able to get healing is it starts with a self-awareness. It starts with a self-awareness of where they're at, and where they're at with God. And that's one of the things that I think is prevalent. I think there's a personal responsibility. And when I say personal responsibility, it can come off a bit callous. When I played professional basketball, I ended up playing in a summer pro league in Sacramento with the Kings, playing in their league, and we beat the veteran team in the semifinal game, and I scored like 40 something, whatever. And, I had everything. I mean, the basket was this big, and I put buckets up. Danny Ainge was guarding me, and I was guarding Danny Ainge. And you talk about a role player, man. That dude gave me 48. I think I gave him 46. And beat him. I think we beat him by 20. And so after the game, Bill Russell came up to me, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and all of these fans were on the floor, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Son, you're going to make a lot of money in this game." And so all these people turned around and they said, "Hey, get this guy's autograph." And then people were saying, "Well, who is he?" He said, "I don't know, but Bill Russell just said he's going to make a lot of money in this game." And so I started signing all these autographs. And I had this agent that when Bill Russell said, "You're going to make a lot of money in this game," he said, "Oh, well, Brandle's going to go overseas and he's got a guaranteed contract for $30,000. And Bill Russell just kind of looked at him, kind of chuckled, and turned his back and walked off. And at that moment, when I look back, when Bill Russell said, "You're going to make a lot of money in this game, son," now I would have said, "Will you please show me how?" I don't know how. Would you please show me what I need to do? Can you help me? But I was okay with, even though I looked at the situation and I knew it was wrong, I was okay with it. And I was like, it sounded funny to me, $30,000, a guaranteed contract. And I ended up not getting that money, and everything went kaput. That's a whole nother story. But that was a choice that I deferred. And not making that choice, not making that, who's to say what would have happened? But my life spiraled after that. And so there's something to me being able to see that and go, yeah, I could blame my agent. There's a lot of things that he did, but I didn't have the wherewithal to fire him as an agent. And I have to own that. And I think that there are times in ministry when things were challenging for me, and I didn't have the wherewithal to stop because I was afraid. There was a piece of me that was like, man, there's nowhere else I would rather be. I don't have anywhere to go back to. And I have to own that. And everybody's situation is different. But there's that piece of being self-aware. And there's that piece of being taking personal responsibility. And I don't know what that looks like for everyone. And I don't know if everyone has that moment. I would like to say that they do. And some of it is we're just not equipped. I think what you're doing in the equipment that you have now, I don't know if there was a lot of folks that had the equipment that you had or were given the green light to use it. And so there's another piece of, you know what I'm saying? We didn't have the equipment. And those things, they're big. And so there are a lot of factors to factor in. And sometimes there's opportunities and we don't take them, and it's just not time. And I think the people that I've seen, they're equipping themselves. It's not, you know what I'm saying, somebody else's responsibility to equip them. I think I heard you say that you have a therapist. Good therapists have therapists. I think there's a piece of self-work that needs to happen. And in some ways you got to kind of find your lane to get those things. Those are the things that I've seen, some of the things that I've seen people use. And then you got to have community. You got to have a place where you're safe. And we're coming up to a different level of safe. And when I say a different level of safe, you have people that have experienced things. And so they're not all shook up when you share your sin or you share your thoughts. I think there was a time in ministry that if you shared, man, maybe it was just me. If you shared, man, I'm having doubts on whether I'm even a person to be in the ministry, somebody needed to take you out of the ministry because you were doubting. And so, I think people that are in touch, it's okay to be fearful. Churchill, all of these guys were fearful. They had fearful moments. Just because you didn't see them doesn't mean that they didn't have them.
That's so true.
And so, Kyle, having said all that, you could probably cut out all of that. And I would say that there's this level of anxiety. And if we can get past that anxiety, I think there's a self-inflicted anxiety that makes it difficult for us to be Christians.
Can you share just briefly about self-inflicted? What does that mean?
Well, I think, we all have episodes. Trauma happens in our lives, and unresolved, uh, un, un, unrecognized trauma. It's replaying episodes. And so the only thing that happens, it may happen in childhood, it may happen in the ministry, it may be a combination of the two, but they're unresolved. And so the only thing that happens is these episodes replay and the players just change.
Hmm.
And so there ends up being somebody that's in this episode now, but it's really an unresolved episode from some other time. And so someone, whether it's a minister or a member, is inflicting a response on a new player, a new cast member. Not that they don't have a place in it, but does that make sense?
Absolutely. Ton of sense. I mean, I put a video out on Christianity and attachment, and the premise of it was people aren't just reacting, they're reenacting. So there's two videos on attachment. One is the psychological versus biblical attachment, but the second one was Christianity attachment, and about 20 minutes long or so. And I get into what you just shared, which is, I like the way you put it, which is the game is the same. The players change, but we just reenact different things. So, we have family of origin issues. We bring that into the next closest family unit that we have that resembles our family unit, and we start reenacting things with them. It's not just we're reenacting a role, usually dysfunctional. I mean, we have to unlearn that, but depends on what the agenda of the church or the congregation or the collection of churches that you've got. Whatever agenda that is, that becomes programmatic. So, for example, let's say that we just do results. I don't want to name drop, but I was talking to Steve Staten, and just thinking about the video I did with him. But I talked about how results shape ministry. They just do, right? And then you end up kind of with a results shaped ministry. Well, in that case, I think I was talking theology. Trauma, same way. And so, results can be a hard driving kind of like, we're pioneers, we're pioneer. And then there's this kind of tension between the pioneers and the settlers, and just that idea of what the agenda is. And if it's go, 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 how are you going to take care of people who that's not their season? And maybe there's gift and there's roles. And we're not even looking at that. Everybody needs to be a full-time whatever. And, well, it doesn't matter what your gift or your role is. Matthew 28:18-20 says, hey, this is the mission, man. Is that, are you in or not? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Time out. All right. The body works together. One of the things I'd like to see, and I think this will be very, I think just in a longitudinal sense, this will be very functional in terms of longevity. I no longer am into this personal evangelism deal. Number one, I think it contributes to the over and hyper individualism we have, number one. But that's where a lot of the trauma comes from, like stats and stuff. A lot of churches who were trying to, baptize the world by the year 2000, they kept stats and they drove hard. And I mean, it was corporate. I'm now thinking in terms of community. So for me, when I think of evangelism, I think in terms of people are going to see like a community, a friendship, kind of like you were saying with your was it Caraway? Dan Caraway, is it his name? Yeah.
Todd Caraway.
Huh?
Todd Caraway.
Todd Caraway.
There were several of them. It was a community, but absolutely.
Well,
I got to shout out Don Tappan, another guy that shared his life with me. I mean, there's a ton of guys, but absolutely.
His life wasn't in a vacuum. In other words, if he had a Porsche in the garage, but his marriage is falling apart, would you have said that? So it's a package deal. And so when people see a functional marriage, when people see a functional parenting unit, when people see a functional small group, when they see that it stands out, there's something different. And I know for me, when I first came, I was a teen service. It's like, something's different here. I don't know what it is.
Absolutely.
There's a level of community I haven't seen anywhere. So I think that's what converts people, is a community, not the individual. And that, I think that's hardwired into a lot of people's schema, right? That's just almost, and that causes incredible trauma because the blast radius of personal evangelism and again, I'm not saying that personal evangelism isn't somewhat biblical and so forth, but I'm talking about how you pressurize that. And then now all of a sudden, we create unbiblical expectations around that type of thing. When if you look in scripture, it's about the community, baby, more than it is about the individual. Anyway, I went on a rant.
No, that was good. It was really good, because I do think that one of the things one of our challenges is that we think that the ministers, they're playing a bunch of roles, and I don't know if everyone understands how important they are. I think I was on a Zoom meeting, and Ben Barnett had just shouted out. He had shouted out the small group leaders and how important they are to the framework of things, and they really are. As their groups get together, as they commune, and people from their communities can come and hang out, those things make a difference. And I would add this, Kyle. There's a piece that I believe in my experience with the people that I meet, that they appreciate when we're real with what's going on with us. And it's not necessarily this, we've got this red carpet experience. Everything is awesome for us all the time. There's this other piece that people appreciate when we're responding to difficulty. We do have difficulty in our lives. We do have challenging seasons. Some of the things that they feel, we feel as well. But it becomes a matter of how we deal with them, and it being a process, and being okay with that process.
Love it. 24 years of ministry wisdom right there, brother. I appreciate you. What do you have coming up? Summer's usually really busy for churches. The Wichita church, I'm sure you guys got a lot going on. What are some upcoming announcements or things you guys have coming up?
It's funny. We talked about a podcast, and I actually approached you and asked you to be on my podcast. And you said, I'll be on your podcast. Just let me know. We had set a date, and now look at you.
I'm trying.
So I've got a podcast that's going to be on the way. And I got a couple of books that are brewing. And I'm waiting on a few more collabos. I'm a collabo person also with my podcast. I really appreciate what you're doing. So we've got that. Be on the lookout for, we've got several guys. One of them is Tony Yanez. He just got his ministry degree, graduated on Saturday.
Yep.
Dude is brilliant. Be on the lookout for him. We got Jason Touche here. Be on the lookout for him. There's another guy named Chris Cadwallader. Be on the lookout for him. We've got a young guy that the Lord has blessed in an incredible way. His name is Ethan Cornett. Be on the lookout for him. And his wife, Marissa. There's a lot of really cool things that God will unfold, and has been for quite some time, and it's been cool to watch. But and we're also looking for 1-year challenge and interns for the summer. So anybody that wants to come and get down, shout us out.
Love it. Yeah. Tony's my boy. We talk almost during the week, almost every day. Ethan and I, we talk probably monthly. He's one of my guys, and Jason and I, we go back. I don't know him as well, but I appreciate him. He last year, this is again, 2020 brought out things. I think for 100 days in a row, Jason Touche did this like video thing on Facebook or whatever, and just like quiet times every day. Man, that brother was in it, and it inspired me, man. His consistency. Well, Brandle, listen, man, I mean this. I really appreciate you blessing me today on the channel. This is going to release onto podcasts. It's going to release on the YouTube channel. I might even take something and put it in one of my blogs and so forth. I appreciate you taking your time. I know it's precious. And I know that there's a lot going on and a lot we could have gotten into. That's the other thing. Structuring a conversation is so hard because, we could have talked about Kobe, man. That would have been, I'm serious. We could have talked about, just some of the, back in the day. You think about how rap affects culture and so forth. And you become a Christian and you try to balance like all, I mean, it's like we could have gone so many different directions, but bro, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Kyle, thank you for being a blessing. It is an honor to be on your channel. I hope that this is a blessing to other people, but man, you've been a blessing in a great way, and it's really cool to watch you connect and continue to grow and do your thing in the Lord, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to say this to you, and I say it to all my guests, that we are with you and God is for you, my brother. And what for those of you that have been with me the entire time, some of you guys stick around to the very end, please like, subscribe, and share the video. I appreciate so many of you who have been doing exactly that, whether it be on Facebook, YouTube. Go to my website, truetraumatheology.com. My email address is kylespears@truetraumatheology.com. Email me. I will do best to get back to you within like a week or so, somewhere around that. If you want video, content, you want to suggest ideas of things you want covered, email me. I will get back to you. We'll kind of figure something out. But my goal is to meet needs, and there's a lot of them. So, hey, we need each other. I'll see you next time.